Welcome to episode 26 of the Rugby League Coach podcast, or should I say, episode one and only of Prop Idol, where we try and find the best props from history and currently from every country that's ever played the game, which, let's be honest, in terms of quality props, it might only be a few countries that we're well and truly talking about. It is, though, a battle for the Ashes today, because I'm going to try and be neutral. I'm an Englishman living in Australia, have done for a long time, but James is very much an Englishman living in Great Britain, and Taylor is very much an Australian living in Australia. Before we go into that, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can always listen to us on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple. And if you listen on any one of them and you want to watch us on YouTube, because I promise you we are very handsome. Well, at least I am anyway. I can't speak for the other two. But before we get into it, Taylor, you must be excited. We're talking about props. I mean, I was speaking to Chris, our mate, today, and I said I was doing a podcast this afternoon, and he said, what are you going to do it on? The season's over. Well, that's it. I mean, every other part of the rugby league media, if you like, if that's what we're part of with this, is dying off. They're having a break. We've come up with a load of content, haven't we, to cover the summer?
Well, what I love, and I literally told you this when you called me, we were thinking about ways we were going to keep the podcast and things we were going to talk about, because we had this discussion. We said, everyone else is knocking off. We're not knocking off. Yeah. So you called me, as you usually do, randomly when I'm at work and my phone goes, it says Lee Addison, and I answer and you go, I've got it, lad. I've got it, lad. We're going to highlight every position on the field every week, starting with the props. Yeah. I said, you've done it again. Well, I'm in. You've hooked me immediately.
Yeah. And of course, you'll be excited because it was your position, mate.
Yeah, it was. Ever since I left school, pretty much halfway through year 12, I went from back row to the front row, and I never looked back from there, underneath yours truly, Lee Addison, who first shifted me in a good level of football to the front row. I played a little bit of front row for club level. But yes, that's where I played pretty much all my football since then.
You normally evolve into a front rower or devolve into a front rower because you pile on too much weight later in the career. But Taylor, your backside became the size of a bus nice and early, and you went straight into the front row as soon as you got into your adult years. James, I've not heard many tales of you running on the field, but I have stood next to you a few times in the north of England, and you're quite a big chap. I dare say you would have been a front rower yourself, especially with a head like that.
I dare say I would have been, Lee. Yeah, that might have been my natural position. Might not have had the pace to go in the back row.
Now, what's going to be intriguing about this? We're going to go through a list of as many past and present ones that we can. I'm predicting that, James, you'll have more of a hold on the past. I will throw some in there too, than Taylor, due to the fact that you've been on the earth a bit longer. Taylor, because he's a current preeminent media man here in Queensland, he will have quite a good hold on what's running around now, especially in Australia. I guess as the arbitrator of the British and Australian battle today as well, I can sort of see both sides. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to play you off against each other, basically. I'd love to come up with the best props that we can in terms of who are the best. Were they in category 1, are they in category 2 or category 3 or ABC, whatever we want to look. But the other thing I'd love to do is do a four-man prop rotation each.
Oh, perfect.
Right. So who would you start with? Who would you be on your bench out of past and present? And we'll just go mad. So I think the best way of doing this, right? We'll go in this order. James, Taylor, Lee. James, Taylor, Lee. Okay? Say a prop's name. We'll react to it, and then we'll go to the next person. And if you say the name twice, if you say a second name, you lose a point. Okay?
Okay.
I don't know how you get points, but you lose one anyway. Okay? So, James, past front rowers. Let's go.
Past front rowers.
Just
right.
one.
Past front rowers. Kevin Ward.
Kevin Ward. Taylor, do you know much about Kevin Ward?
I know nothing about Kevin Ward.
British prop forward. Very good. Very tough. Good old tape around the head. Legs the size of tree trunks. Used to vaz up his knees and his thighs. One of them. Wore the tight shorts. famous for flying into Sydney on a red-hot spring day, getting off the plane and playing for Manly in the Sydney Grand Final. I think it was the last one at the SCG against Canberra and getting man of the match. So he's a Manly Warringah player. Yeah. So he's very well respected over here. James, educate Taylor on Kevin Ward.
So you're saying that he flew in on the same day of the grand final?
I think it was either the day before or the day before, but either way, it was a miracle effort. Played for most of the game, got man of the match.
He did. Yeah, he made a good name for himself in Australia with that. Prop more from the mid to late 80s, very early 90s. Started his career a long time playing for Castleford. And then
definitely the sort of traditional sort of working man's mining town type thing.
Yeah. Then he a lot of caps for Great Britain. I don't know exactly how many, but quite a few. And then and then went to St Helens, a very good St Helens team in the early 90s. But had a career very serious leg break. Remember that game at Central Park when he had
Certainly do. It was at Easter, Good Friday.
It was. Yeah, so very, very good.
Ended his career and he still can't walk properly now as a result, basically.
Yeah, right.
So over to you, Taylor, a past front rower.
One of my personal favourites, even though he played against every team I ever supported, Shane Webke.
Yeah, mate. Go on.
Yeah.
Shane Webke, the one thing about Shane Webke is, and I've read bits of his book, is that he used to pride himself on going as hard in the last play as he did in the first. And I one of the most hallmark things I remember about Shane Webke is he was always get his side out of trouble. It's like he grew an extra leg.
Yeah.
You know, if they were down on the scoreboard, they were pinned in their end, down their end of the field. Somehow Shane Webke would come up with a 15-metre run. He'd just run over the top of blokes and just someone that played well above their height week in, week out.
The 2006 grand final, I think he played with a broken arm.
He did. Really? You remember that? It was a broken...
I know a bloke who's done that, by the way.
Broken... Oh, Leroy.
Yeah.
Yours truly.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah.
Did
played
you know...
for 2 weeks with it.
Yeah, so you knew it was broken pre-game?
Yeah.
End of the season, obviously.
Yeah, last couple of weeks we needed to win, so we did and got the job done. But anyway, that's enough about me. Let's talk about the second prop in the conversation, Shane Webke.
Yeah, Shane, obviously, very storied career for Australia, very popular in Brisbane and for Queensland as well. During really the start of that era of dominance, I believe Shane was very much involved in that team in the late teens. And yeah, just inspirational stuff. Shane Webke.
I'm going to add mine, who I think is almost a prototype, but again, I like this fella because he's the kind of guy who always got back really quickly to do the dirty work. He knew what his job was on the field. And I think he was as key to the success of Queensland, Australia in the 2013 World Cup, and the Cowboys in the 2015 NRL Premiership, Matthew Scott. Matt Scott. Yeah. I think he is... I personally think he's better than Webke and Petro. I just have him up there. We're talking minuscule differences. I just thought he was a little bit more athletic than Webke, yet still had that sort of similar sort of physique, really. He was a bit lower to the ground than, say, a Petro, who's another one that we'll no doubt mention. I'll scrub him off the list. Petro was quite... I've sneaked in two there, haven't I? Petro's quite a tall guy, and I found that even though he was quite direct, he was actually quite fast, Petro, and therefore had a big engine. But I think Scott had that combination of bulk, slightly lower centre of gravity than Petro, and work rate, something chronic. And I don't think it's any coincidence that both Queensland and Cowboys have started to slip since Matt Scott wasn't there. I honestly think that was his impact on the team. James, we're over to you again.
Right. Adrian Morley.
Moz.
Yeah, who made a great career for himself, both sides, both in the Northern and Southern Hemispheres. A big reputation in Australia.
You'll know all about Moz. You'll all know all about Moz, won't you, Taylor?
Oh, yeah, mate. I love watching Adrian Morley play. And I particularly remember the Great Britain Lions tour. and I'm not gonna remember his name, but it's when Willie Mason got in the scrap with
Stuart Fielding.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was in that tour, Adrian Morley was just on fire.
Yeah.
And I particularly remember how rolled up he was. And it's funny, I've never seen anyone so rolled up playing in that jersey until Sam Burgess really came on the scene and almost, had the same sort of firebrand attitude.
What a find. Sorry, go on.
Sam Burgess is not involved today because, in my opinion, he's a lock. So we're going to leave him for the
lock. Interesting.
Right,
Interesting. Well, but I'm the referee.
Okay.
Now, what a little thing I've noticed there, right? Do you not think Matt Scott used to watch Shane Webke and model some of his game on him? Based on the eras that came through. They are actually quite similar when you think about it. Yes. Do you not think Burgess watched Mozza?
I think absolutely Burgess.
They're almost, I wouldn't say the carbon copies, but they're very similar attributes. Morley was fearless, James, wasn't
he? He was. Well, wasn't there the story when Erwin Guttenbeil, when he got a big hit in on him in his early days in NRL?
Yeah,
and Morley finished the job, so to speak.
Villa Santi in the grand final in 02 because he whacked Fittler.
Now, I'm pretty confident saying this. I might be wrong. I might have my wires crossed, but I'm pretty confident that Adrian Morley was one half of one of my favourite front row combinations ever.
Go on.
And that was with Jason Riles. Didn't they play together at the Roosters?
Yeah. I think they would have done at some point.
I think they did, and I remember them being one of my favourite forward combinations when they played together at the Roosters. I'm pretty sure. Fact check me on that.
I will have a look.
Because I love Jason Riles as I grew up a Dragons supporter, so I was massive on Jason Riles.
So you added him to your list?
No, that's not who I was going to say next.
Hang on. So I'm going to tell you a Morley story.
Tell us a Morley story. Do
you remember when he got sent off in the 12th second of a match?
Yeah. For Robbie Kearns, a hit on Robbie Kearns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the changing rooms beforehand, it's been told that he got dressed for the game and ready for the game a full hour and a half before kickoff because he'd been banned for the rest of the season in Australia. So basically what he wanted to do was show how good he was to every Australian. And he decided to do that by knocking Robbie Kearns into next week. But he did say that... it's because I'm typing here and think at the same time. Mike Forshaw, the back rower from Great Britain that same day, said he was in the defensive line from the kickoff with Mozza. And as soon as he turned around, you look at the bloke on your right and just flew out the line. He was gone. I can confirm Mozza and Jason Riles did not play together at the Roosters.
They didn't play together.
Nah. Moz left in 2006. Jason Riles started there in 2010. What they did do, though, was obviously run around in similar eras. So
they did.
Probably bashed each other, actually, at some point. So,
I was a big Riles fan. And Riles has actually turned into quite the rugby league mind now, hasn't he?
Yeah.
As an assistant coach. My next prop will touch the hearts of both of you men. And I think this bloke, if you spoke, Lee, about, Scott emulating a little bit of Webke. I think this bloke was one of the first to do this in rugby league and one of the first props to do so. James Graham had all those tough attributes and those skills, but didn't he have beautiful hands as well? He was one of the first times in that 2012 Bulldogs forward pack. They had a lot of skill in that forward pack, but he really showed how he just had a soft touch with his hands, didn't he?
There'll be people now listening to this going, Taylor, but there's people who did this in such an era. So basically, I think what James Graham did was bring some skill back to front row that that sort of went out the game a little bit when it became a bit bash and barge. Because I'm going to use my chance to do two names again, right? This is just the host's prerogative, right? Because I'm sort of wrapping it up, right?
Yeah, no,
James will like this one. Lee Crooks.
Yeah,
skillful, very skillful.
Yeah,
ahead of his time in many ways. And then the other one, who I've never seen in the flesh or even that much footage, but if you read about him, was very, very skillful. Good old Artie Beetson, mate. So I think what James Graham did, I'm not saying James Graham is Artie Beetson, but he sort of brought that I think James Graham has been the market leader in props that stand, go to the line, turn and pass and do a backman play kind of thing.
Yes.
To a point where I sometimes felt he did it too much, a little bit. But there was no doubt in his toughness. And again, he was another one of those props, mate, who decided to take the game by the scruff of the neck, which can be quite hard. Yeah. Like Moz was one of those who decided to take it by the scruff of the neck. So, yeah, I've thrown in 2, James.
Are we excluding New Zealanders from this?
Not at all, mate. No,
bring him in.
Right.
I'm sorry, can I just
Can I just go with one, or can I name 2?
Go 2, mate.
Joe Van Ganaar and Greg Eastwood, both great at handling the ball.
Greg Eastwood, absolutely great at handling the ball.
Monster for Greg Eastwood.
Joe Van Ganaar.
Was he at the Bulldogs and then over there they had a spell? Did he play for Brisbane?
I think he had a season there later in his career, didn't he?
No,
a bit of time at Leeds.
I think he had a season there at the start of his career, Lee. Right. Eastwood, and then he went to the Bulldogs, and I'm pretty sure that's the way it worked out.
Very well researched Eastwood. Here on the Rugby League Coach podcast. Who's your 2, Taylor? You can have 2 now.
Oh yeah, we're opening right up, aren't we? We're just allowed to do whatever we want these days. It's great. Look, I'm a little bit stumped. I'm going to bring up one that I saw today, just because I hadn't thought of the greats before I come on. Certainly, Keith Galloway is one that I absolutely love watching playing football. Yeah. But he was the leader of that Tigers pack, wasn't he, Lee?
Yep.
That Tigers pack that won the competition. You know, he had Bryce Gibbs to do all the firepower for him, come off the bench and ruffle a few feathers. But Keith Galloway played big minutes as a 6'3", 120 kilo front rower. He was very important for the Tigers that year. He was massive. And then let's talk about Ruben Wiki.
Oh, mate. He was my favourite.
Yeah.
It was my favourite.
Scary coming off the back fence.
As a kid.
Scary coming off the back fence.
As a kid, he was my favourite.
I don't think, that we've had many other really scary people coming off the back fence like Ruben Wiki. The only other one that springs to mind is Fui Moi Moi. When Moi Moi come off the back fence, you'd almost, it was in the NRL, but you'd still almost not kick off to him.
I think why somebody like Fui Moi Moi, some of the props, like the difference, why some of them went further in the game than others is because of what they did in defence. Some of them got really exposed laterally because they were so big. Some of them came through in the unlimited interchange era, so they could get hooked off the field pretty quick if they were getting exposed laterally. But some of these props now in the 8 interchange and 6 again rule era would be a little bit found wanting, I think, unless they spent a bit more time on the treadmill.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about the best front rowers ever, you're certainly not bringing Fui or Keith into those conversations. No. But the impacts they had on their sides for those seasons was huge.
Agreed.
Not necessarily the best players and not even in the conversation for the best ever in those positions, but the impact they had. And, the impact Fui Moi Moi had on the game, mate. Everyone loved watching Fui Moi Moi play just because of the way he played.
Yeah.
And it was similar with Ruben Wiki. I'm going
to throw in two names before I come up with my pièce de résistance.
Okay.
In fact, I think it could be 3 because if I mention one, I've got to mention the other.
Okay.
Ian Roberts.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Athletic. It was an athletic prop in a day where you still had very heavy props. He was a very tall, sinewy, athletic prop. Another one that reminds me in a similar ilk is the Chief, Paul Harrigan. And you can't mention the Chief without mentioning Spud Carroll. So, yes. Mate, that 97 grand final and that season when Spud and Chief went after each other, bloody hellfire. Mate, what an era of football that was. Bring me back. Ian Roberts, I remember him standing on Dennis Betts' head in the 3rd test in 1994. That's probably not the best thing to do or to suffer from. But yeah, I was a massive fan of Ian Roberts, who was actually born in England, James. He could have played for England.
Right.
Yeah, he was born in London. Yeah. So I've taken 3, so I guess feel free to.
I've got two enforcers here in the 2000 noughties of NRL, 2000s, Dave Taylor and Mark O'Mealy.
Dave Taylor and Mark O'Mealy.
The ogre. The ogre.
Dave Taylor, you know what? I'm a bit loath to put him in with this group.
What about his conditioning? Did he so was that because of his conditioning? What reasons that?
He was just up and down, wasn't he? I mean, he was a massive body. He could have been anything.
I think that.
He ended up in Catalan, didn't he?
Yeah. And for a while there, he played in I forget who sponsored it at the time, so I'll say the Queensland Cup. And honestly, he was huge. Taylor, you might have been commentator. Yeah.
I played against him.
Go on then. Go on.
Yeah. When it got to that stage in his career, mate, he was, he was about 10 to 15 kilos more overweight. And if you remember Dave Taylor, he played at his fittest at about 115. Yeah. So we're talking about, a 130 kilo Dave Taylor trying to chip and chase in the Queensland Cup. Not ideal conditions for good old Dave. But I mean, we can't gloss over the second name you brought to the table there in Mark O'Mealy, and he's another one that he's synonymous with that era of the Bulldogs, isn't he? Like when you think of I've read Jonathan Thurston's book.
Throw another name in there from that era while you're there, if you want.
Roy Azatazi
from the Dogs, yeah, him. Yeah. But then there's another one.
Willie Mason played front row.
Yeah.
He was a great front row for him.
Yeah.
Look, you think about that era, and Jonathan Thurston used to talk about that club, when he was there, and it was a family club, but that was the true Dogs of War era, wasn't it?
What you're talking about there, I think, is a combination that worked well too. Asatazi, O'Mealy. I'm not saying they were all on the field at the same time or anything like that, but they were certainly intertwined. Mason,
yes.
And I'll go to combinations and how they work before we go to the modern day prop. All right, are you ready for my nuclear option?
Yes.
We've not mentioned him yet. Glenn Lazarus.
Well, I can't really speak too much about Glenn Lazarus because I didn't see in the blocker. I didn't. These are players that I didn't really watch play or get to see around. And
both internationals. Lazarus, nickname the Brick with Eyes, which gives you an idea of how tough he was, and that also goes for David Gillespie, the Cement. Yes. But Glenn Lazarus, I mean, serial grand final winner, won it with the Broncos, won it with Canberra, won it with Melbourne, and again. For that, sort of read somebody like Matt Scott, read somebody like Shane Webke, who I think, you've got your halves and your hookers and your outside backs that do certain things, but none of them can flourish unless they've got a front row that's dominating. And I think these guys have been pivotal in those premiership wins, basically. So Lazarus is one of the top of the tree for me, really. You got any more left, James?
Quite a few. We just going for
just rattle off some names quickly. Then they'll all be British.
Quentin Pongia.
Yeah. I put him down. Did you get that off the Rugby League socials today? Did you?
One going way back, Kurt Sorensen.
Excellent. Yeah, Kurt Sorensen, good player.
Yeah, but Barry McDermott as an impact prop.
Barry Mack.
It's going.
He'd never forgive me if I didn't mention him. Same with Terry.
A very, very good offloading prop forward. Maybe not the best power-wise. Darren Britt.
Very good offloader, yeah. I thought he was excellent for St Helens. Another dog, Taylor.
Yeah,
of course, you played with his son in the team I coached.
Yes, that's right, young Dean, who also had a good offload in him.
Yep.
Nathan Kalis.
Yep, had him on my list.
Nathan Kalis, yeah.
Frank Pritchard, a bit more recent, big.
He was Frank Pritchard and Sam Cassiano and that 2012.
Keep going, James. Finish your list off.
Paul Rauhihi.
Don't remember it.
He went
you
to
don't remember Rauhihi?
Probably early
Cowboys.
2000s.
I remember him.
Andrew G from the Broncos before that.
Yeah. Well, they've named a schoolboy cup after him. So
Jamie Peacock.
Yep, very good. Did he resonate over here with you, Taylor? Jamie Peacock.
Yes, I remember Jamie Peacock.
Very good.
One from the 90s, David Fairley, Kangaroo.
Good player. James will have researched every prop forward in there.
A fellow who had a spell at Wigan, Jerry CU.
Yep, I had him down.
Becca Paliacina.
Mm-hmm. Don't just list every prop. Make sure they're very good ones, won't you?
Yeah. Les Boyd was a bit before my time when I watched it. There's a lot of stories about him at Warrington.
Yeah.
In the early 80s.
Do you want to finish your list off, Taylor?
Lee, do you have? This is more of a personal question. Where do you rate Luke Bailey?
Yeah,
mate, his brickwork in the middle of the park for the Titans, but the Dragons particular, he was massive.
You know who else
around the time of Mick Wayman?
Pryor, the fellow who ended up at Leeds, who was at
Matt
Cronulla and St. George.
Matt Pryor, yeah, he could play football, absolutely.
Have you got any more on your list, Taylor, that you want to rattle out? Or?
Mate, I'm sure they'll all come out eventually. I'm keen to start digging my nails into the modern game.
A few on my socials, because as you know, I've been putting stuff out there on socials to preempt this. Steve Price got mentioned.
Oh, yes, Steve Price, yeah.
I tell you who's come up a lot, and he's very well respected. Andrew Fafita.
Well, he's in my best 4 rotation ever. There you go.
Okay. Greg Dowling got brought up
from that 86 story.
Marty Bella.
Oh, Martin Bella.
Tony Butterfield.
Did he play for Newcastle?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any others that you want to mention, James, before we move on?
Just looking down the list of Australians that I've got.
Because he has literally listed everyone that's ever worn number 8, 10.
I've listed quite a few. Sam Backo from the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah.
Taylor might not remember it.
Yep. Back out. I just want to come back out.
Yeah. A good one over here who played in Super League, Apollo Perolini.
Yeah, not bad player. Yeah. I just got a message off Bobby Goulding, actually. Same era.
Right
right now, yeah.
Same team.
I played with both of Bobby Goulding's sons. There you go.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Really?
At the Dolphins.
Okay.
Yeah. Brad and also Bobby. They came out for a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good fellas.
Right,
Anyway.
James, you've got no more. I reckon you're starting to scrape the barrel a bit if you're not careful.
Yeah, possibly.
Right. To be the meat in the sandwich between the old props and the new props. What makes a good one? James, I'll start with you.
A good one now. Well, stamina is one thing. Now, just being able to get back and your team's defending, being able to get back and join the attacking line as soon as possible to give your team an option. Hitting the ball at speed, quick play the ball, landing on your front, footwork, being able to cause a bit of deception for the defenders. Subtlety if you're going to pass or carry the ball up.
Taylor, you played at an elite level. What kind of stuff did you used to work on to make yourself a better prop forward?
Look, there's lots of stuff I used to work on in particular. Just, little things, find spaces, angles, footwork, carrying the ball in 2 hands, how you're positioning the ball, all those sorts of things. But I think the thing that made a really good front rower, it still does, in my opinion, is the ability to not be aggressive, because anyone can be aggressive, but strike genuine fear in your opposition. Like, if you're coming up against James Fisher-Harris in the modern game, which in my opinion, he's the best front rower currently in the game. I love James Fisher-Harris. When he takes a hit up, someone's dreading tackling that man, that he's made of granite and he fights for every yard. And that if you're taking a hit up against James Fisher-Harris, people are looking for him and moving away from him. And that's how you've got a really ominous rock in the middle of the park. And I think that's crucial for any good front rower. And you can say the same about your Matt Scotts in those eras. You can say the same about your Webkeys. Yeah. People genuinely looked for them and were
get out of the way.
Yeah. They got out of their way because they had a presence about them. And I think that presence in itself,
I agree,
is one of the most important things about a front rower, because if you can't, no one remembers Shane Webke for holding the ball in 2 hands or hitting gaps or anything like that. Shane Webke's known for his presence. Matt Scott,
scaring the crap out of the opponent.
No doubt they had all those things, but the most memorable thing was that presence.
I compare playing in the front row to heavyweight boxing. And what you're talking about there, I'll use an analogy. You can be a good boxer, you can be a good pugilist with all the techniques, or you can be Mike Tyson and absolutely bash your opponent. Yeah. So there'll be many people who say Tyson wasn't as good a boxer as many others, what he was a brilliant fighter. And I guess even the modern prop, if they can have some of that mongrel that does scare the opponent a little bit, that gets on top of them, that influences the attack, that still does matter, I think.
Yes.
I think some other tactical considerations are your front rowers only get a small bit of room to work in. And I used to talk to you a lot about this, Taylor, about getting wide of the ruck so the markers didn't get you, getting your body position so that you're hitting the line in a way that you are getting the most momentum to go forward.
Yeah.
About stepping from one shoulder onto somebody else's so that you're getting an arm rather than a shoulder. And then in that split second, do you offload? Do you drop to ground, play the ball quickly?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, sorry, do you bust? Do you offload? Do you, just quick decisions.
Yeah.
And I think traditionally prop forwards peaked later in the year because of the streetwise nature of it. What we're getting with some modern forwards, and I'll talk about this a bit more later, we're actually getting the game changed a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more on that. I guess the next thing now that I want to talk about just before we move on to the modern prop is the combination of them.
Yes.
So I'll start with you this time, Taylor. Have a think about some of the prop rotations you played in. And as you know, that I played you in a certain role. Have a think. What were the best? What felt the best? What worked the best? Tell me about it.
Types of players?
Yeah. So, you might pull something from your past or whatever and say this worked well because. Because I certainly have some tactical considerations when I'm putting my threesome or foursome together, because sometimes you play with three, sometimes you play with four.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all comes down to the personnel you have and what their best attributes are, and what brings out the best in the team. One of the best front row rotations I think I played in was my first year at the Dolphins. John Green, who's played a lot of NRL for the Sharks, the Dragons, he played for the Broncos, a few things. He was our starting front rower. And then a bloke who unfortunately passed during a game, James Ackerman, he was the other starting front rower. They were both really strong, hard-nosed, no sort of, nothing flary, nothing over the top.
James Ackerman was quite mobile, wasn't he? He wasn't
very mobile.
He wasn't in the sense, yeah.
No. He was very mobile, and he actually had good hands, but he was just very tough. Another person that had sort of a bit of a presence on the field, not a man of many words, a great man though. So those two had a really good starting combination. And then I was coming off the bench with David Huller. Not sure if you remember David Huller.
I remember the name, yeah.
Yeah, so he played for the Broncos, and purely for the Broncos, he was an impact forward. And we just had a really good mix, and as you know, my strength was always coming on with a little bit of leg speed and trying to find gaps in behind me. That was when I played my best football.
Who was the first to do that with you, Taylor?
Yeah, you were the first one to put me in the front row in those.
I put you on off the bench all the time, because what I used to do, roughly, if I could have my utopian scenario, James, right, I'd have a couple of bookends that basically knock the line backwards and soak up some of the opposition pressure. And then when the opposition front row feel like they've got on top of things or they've dealt with things, I then either bring two more that are even bigger on, which I've done in the past, especially at Ipswich at one point. My two best props, really, the ones that were going to get NRL contracts, were on the bench. So I put the ones that didn't end up with NRL contracts at the start to soak up the early firepower, and then brought the better ones on. But another way of doing that, James, is to bring two mobile ones on, so that when the game's a bit broken down, when some forwards are struggling for a mouthful of air and the defensive line's a bit ragged, faster forwards with some good footwork can really make inroads. And another thing that I've done a lot in the past, mate, is I've had a bookend and a mobile. When I say a bookend, I mean somebody who's a bit straight up and down, just heavy body. Because if that heavy body goes into the line first and you're programming it, and then the mobile front rower goes second, you can actually generate a good set on the back of that unless you've started with your outside backs, and then you just add to the rest of it. So there's all these things that you can come up with. So bear that in mind, James. You're going to be coaching next year. What do you think you'd like to run with?
Well, I go back to I go back to this, where the variation that Bradford Bolts pack, default go back. But Brian McDermott, he had so much stamina. We have not mentioned him, but the amount of times that Brian McDermott will play the ball quickly, and be efficient and land on his front.
Yeah.
Remember the first try in the 1997 Challenge Cup final that Bradford scored with Danny Peacock out wide, and it came on the back.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah. What is he on about? What's he on about? He's just talking like a fanboy now, isn't he? 1997 Challenge. There was about 85 tries in that game.
Yeah. But then they bring Paul Anderson on, Stuart Fielder.
Right.
And that.
You're right. You're
Joe
spot on.
Wangener, very good pair of hands.
So Taylor, Joe Wangener, Brian McDermott, Stuart Fielder, and a fella called Paul Anderson, who was huge. Bradford won the 97 comp in Super League, first past the post, just by barging over everyone, basically. So, so that's if you can get 4 that can roll over everyone, that's quite a good place to have.
Yeah, it's something that's very hard to achieve this day with the modern salary cap.
That's right.
To get 4 props of that quality, because they get snapped up. You often have to be a little bit strategic around who you play and where you play them.
I also think there's an argument to say that, like a lot of locks seem to have morphed into the third prop. It's probably changed a bit of the way the game is played in terms of some of your props don't need as much of a spell anymore because they've not got as much of the workload. But anyway, we digress. I reckon we start talking about the modern ones now, and I think Taylor, I'm going to start with you, and then go to James, and then come to me for the modern ones. And whatever you start, if you say 2, we'll go with 2. If you say 3, we'll go with 3. If you say 1, we'll go with 1.
Yeah, I think I've said his name already. James Fisher-Harris, for mine, is currently the best front rower in the game. And it comes down to a lot of things. His stamina and work ethic on the park is just something else. He's always involving himself in tackles. He never goes past work. He always puts in for his teammates. You can see it. You can see how much he cares and he loves it. And he's really good at it. And that presence, I've spoke about it before, and it's not just him on the field. You can see the way he carries himself off the field, that he's got that air about him, and it's just self-confidence. And he walks around like he's the best front rower in the world, because I think he knows he's the best front rower in the world, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think he knows when he gets on the football field, no one can hang with him. If they're as tough as him, that's fine. They won't last the minutes. If they last the minutes, they won't go with the same aggression or intensity as he was. He just beats everyone in the NRL, every other front rower, in 1 or 2 little spots. And for mine, James Fisher-Harris is just the epitome of the modern front rower. I love watching him play.
I agree with 99.9% of the things you said, apart from who is the best. I think he is slightly shaded by somebody else, but I'll see if James mentions him.
Right, I like Jesse Bromwich of Melbourne. He seems to met the yards very, very well. But another one I like, who seems to play the ball quickly and wins a collision, Martin Tapau from Manly.
I find him a little bit straight up and down, and not as good as he should be laterally sometimes.
Yeah,
I find him a little bit like that. I don't think he's a bad player at all, but he's a little bit more one-dimensional than some of the others.
I think at one stage Martin Tapau was, especially when he was at the Bulldogs, he was playing some really good football for them. When he first went to Manly, he was playing some really good football for them. But yeah, Marty Tapau, I don't see him up there in the elites that we have in the competition currently.
I don't know his background in terms of how he was picked up and whether he played since he was 6 years old or anything, but he does strike me as somebody who might have been picked up as an athlete for his athletic prowess. Maybe started the game a bit late, and then they've sort of tried to mould him. I don't want to sort of double down and triple down on Marty Tapau, because I reckon he's a really good player, but I just don't know if he's in that elite bracket.
No, he played a lot of football for the Bulldogs in New South Wales Cup and things like that. I believe he actually played 20s at the Bulldogs as well. I could be wrong.
Did you see James did 2 then? So I'm going to do 2.
Okay.
I think the best front rower in the game right now is Junior Paulo. And he's skillful too. He's huge. Yeah. And he's a massive man. And he's not, you can't exploit him as much as you think you can in defence, just about the size of him. I think he's took his game in the last couple of years to another level. And I think somebody who has the absolute ability to transcend the game if they haven't already. And I just think that some of the off-field talk knocked him a bit skew with this year. But Payne Haas, I mean, I literally think he can be the best thing in the game. We're talking about a prop who can regularly make 40-meter breaks, can regularly take 2 hit-ups in a set, doesn't particularly struggle too much laterally or whatnot. One we didn't mention in the past is Paul Gallen. Paul Gallen was one of the first who actually went hard for 80 minutes on a field in the middle. The problem is he sometimes played at lock.
Yeah, that's why, because of his lock, that's why I didn't really put him in. But I suppose it was a bit half, really.
Yeah.
Well, he only really played
is the next one that can play 80, basically.
He only really played front row for State of Origin. And don't get me wrong, that game in Suncorp, when Paul Gallen played 80 minutes in front row, is probably the best performance I've ever seen by a front row in that arena. I think we can all agree that as much as the international game is exciting, all that sort of stuff, the area and Origin, I think State of Origin is traditionally a little bit faster, Lee, meters per minute and sets per.
And it's tougher.
So
yeah. I mean,
but in terms of speed of the game, which is where the front rowers really, feel it, for Paul Gallen to play 80 minutes in the modern game like he did,
unbelievable.
It just speaks of a gas tank that is unheard of for a man that's 115, 100, whatever kilos. That was sensational, and it deserves a mention. But I would like to mention him with the locks, in my personal opinion. I think one this year, fellas, that was really impressive. Is Ruben Cotter.
Yes.
And he's very much the new style of front rower, isn't he? He's quicker than any other prop in the game. He gets into spots that props traditionally couldn't get into. And it's because, a year ago, 2 years ago, he was a hooker. He was a 9.
I'm just holding judgment on him because I wonder if he's a little bit of a, like the Wolfman had a season or 2 and he was in the Australian team and then you never saw him again on the wing. And there's been a few like that.
Yeah, but regardless.
I wonder if Cotter's got to prove he's not one of them because he didn't play that much in the World Cup, did he either?
Yeah, but I'd argue you could say the same thing about Junior. You could say the same thing about Junior Paulo.
No, I think he's been
He's been in the NRL for a while. Ruben Cotter's been around for a while. Hasn't played as much NRL as Paulo. But Paulo always had some very big gaping holes in his game. He could never quite last the distance. All those sorts of things. I think what Paulo's built into his game this year, he hasn't noticeably trimmed down. He hasn't noticeably picked up an extra yard or 2 of pace. I think he's just found some efficiencies in maybe the way he gets to the defensive line, and he's been able to probably preserve the gas tank for a little bit longer, Junior Paulo. And I'm not ragging on Junior Paulo. I think you're right. I think he's absolutely in the top 3 in the game at the moment. He is absolutely sensational. But I just think pound for pound, Fisher Harris squeezes him out. But the way that Paulo's been playing at the moment, and the offload that Junior Paulo has is just, talk about a game breaker. If you need someone to create something, he can create something and safely. I'd like to see a percentage on offloads attempted to offloads converted.
James, you're up.
Well, I mentioned him last week, but Jake Tavojevic.
Yep,
absolutely great with the collision and the running lines and the tackling technique. What about just thinking of one with potential, maybe that I've seen at Brisbane? Potential, Thomas Flegler.
I'm the same, I'm a bit of a Flegler fan.
Yeah, I do like Thomas. I like Thomas Flegler in the way he plays. He does have that aggressive streak in him, and he's tough. He's strong. I think he still needs a year or 2 to build into it. And it's really hard for Tom Flegler because you're at a club where they're known for pumping out the best of the best front rowers, Petro, Webke. They've had all these absolutely outstanding front rowers. You've also got a bloke who's the same age as you, if not younger, in Payne Haas, who's arguably one of the best props in the game. So it's very hard to almost get the line, or, the raps that he deserves there because he does play good football. And then you've got Pat Carrigan playing lock, who's also playing outstanding football. So it's hard to shine a little bit. But, look, Thomas Flegler's certainly got the wherewithal about him to become one of the game's better props.
I'm going to throw in 2.
Probably not too far away from a Queensland jersey there, Tom Flegler.
Agreed. I'm going to throw in a couple. Josh Papali'i.
Yes. Yeah.
Particularly in the Origin arena. And I'm telling you, one of the best front rowers in this country at the minute, Millie Boyle.
She is like...
Right, I guess she will.
She is to the women's competition like what LeBron James is to the NBA.
Yeah.
She's a level above. The way she played in that grand final was just all heart, all grit. You know, every time she touched the ball, she's just as athletic as the outside backs, but as tall and as strong as all the other front rowers in the game.
The scary thing for the world game in the girls' rugby league, the ladies' rugby league, is that she decided not to go to the World Cup for personal reasons.
Yeah, it's sad. It's very sad. But you know, she's got her head screwed on straight. That's absolutely 100% fact guaranteed. She's got her hand dipped in a lot of, you know, businesses and charity work. You can see she's always about it. And on the football field, I know I mentioned him earlier, but she's almost like a female sort of Sam Burgess type, you know? The way she goes about it, she's mobile in the middle of the park. She's got a lot of skill about her. She plays with aggression as well. She really is the epitome. I'd say probably the best player. She did get the Player of the Year award, but she's the best player in that competition by far and wide.
For time considerations for the pod, so it doesn't become a 3-hour one while I'm here, I might just rattle off a couple just to get through. I want to give a shout out to Vita Totola, who I think's doing great things at Souths. Alex Walmsley in the UK. James. Okay. I actually think in many ways the Bulldogs got the wrong prop when they picked one up from England. I think they looked at the grand. They should have. Yeah. I was impressed by Luke Thompson in one of the grand finals, but the reality is
Warrior Hargraves.
Warrior Hargraves, brilliant. Yes. I think Warrior Hargraves, you know, goes in a similar pocket to the likes of Webkey and Harris. We're talking about the fear factor. I think I'd like to mention TK Aho too, just because I love saying his name.
Siwa.
Right, TK Aho. What, you know, but he's a good player. The two Safiti boys, good footballers. I actually struggle to tell them apart sometimes when they play because they've got very similar styles in my eyes.
Tino,
Tino, not bad at all. What I will say about some of these players, how would they compare to some of the ones we've mentioned previously?
Matt Lodge, Adam Fanua-Blake.
I just asked a question, you just ignored it.
Sorry, but I'm still mentioning some pretty quality front rowers.
Joe Tapini.
Oh, Tapine. Didn't he have a good year? Didn't he have a good year this year?
What's your thoughts on Regan Campbell Gillard?
I like Regan Campbell Gillard. I really do. But he just doesn't have that fear factor that I like in a front rower. And so
because of his moustache.
No, it's not his moustache. He just doesn't have, and it's, I sound very pretentious when I say this. I sound very, you know what I mean? But it's almost like you hear about, you watch those videos and movies and they're talking about, you know, rock stars or something, and some random manager goes, they just don't have it. You know, and he just doesn't have it, and he doesn't have that aura.
Exactly what you're trying to say and what you mean. Yeah,
it's hard for me to vocabularize what I'm trying to say, but
it's hard for you to vocabularize vocabulary too.
What do you mean? Vocabularize. I'm pretty sure that's a word. Google check me. But yeah, I do like Regan Campbell Gillard. Massive part of the Parramatta Eels' success. I mean, he's an Australian front rower, has been since 2017. So you can't deny that he's one of the best we have in the game at the moment. For mine, I prefer Matt Lodge. I really do. I prefer Matt Lodge. And a lot of those players that are in these, because arguably the Tongan, Samoan sides, you know, the New Zealand sides had better forward packs than the Australians, or at least better front rowers.
Rattle off some names, James. Shut this bloke up for a bit.
Current NRL, David Clemmer. He's been around a few years now.
He's adding a bit to his game, isn't he, Clemmer?
Yeah, yes, David Clemmer. Looking... That's another one here.
Any more?
Josh Maguire. He's just come over to Catalan now. Josh Maguire.
Yeah.
Aaron Woods.
Sharon.
Yeah.
Sharon Woods.
James Tamu. James Tamu.
James Tamu. The second coming of Tamu. He's playing some good football now. There's certainly some quality front rowers running around today. And I guess, like, you know, you mentioned Aaron Woods, you mentioned James Tamu, David Clemmer. You know, it wasn't too long ago that all these players were Australian representatives.
They've gone through them a little bit, haven't they?
They have gone through them. They've picked up a few and gone back out the other side. There was one stage where Aaron Woods was the best front rower in the world, and one of the best front rowers in the world. No one would argue against that. Well, sorry, lots of people would argue against that. He's always been someone that people like to criticise.
We've not mentioned Jason Tamalolo at all yet.
No, we haven't. I would put him more as I know I played him out of position in the World Cup team. I put him more as a loose lock forward, maybe. But
that's because he was. But I think hasn't Peyton moved him a bit more in the front row?
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to put him as a front row because he wears the 13, has worn the 13, always will wear the 13. You could make an argument that you'd switch Tomalolo and Cotter around, but I just think Tomalolo's synonymous with the 13 jersey now, and it's just a thing. And it's almost a branding thing for the Cowboys, I think. You know, the amount of kids running around Townsville that would have 13 Tomalolo on the back of their jersey, would be the amount of Tongans that would have 13 Tomalolo. Now, whether he plays more like a front rower, he does, things that are very front row-ish. And Ruben Cotter very much plays more so like a lock. Yeah. But other than positions off kickoffs, the way that Cowboys play it is the exact same. So it just depends. It all comes down to tactics.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a British one up from the last World Cup. Chris Hill was brilliant. The only thing is I don't think he's going to be that long until he's in the column on the left of my page, which is the old players, because he's right at the end of his career. Any other names, James?
Thinking of trying to think of one or two.
Nelson Asafa Salomon.
That's it. Another one.
Can't believe we missed him. We haven't spoken about him already. Mate, James, you spoke about Aaron Woods before you spoke about Asafa Solomona.
I did. I did.
Kick you out of the club for doing that.
Add in Fanua Blake at the Warriors.
Yeah, not bad. At all, yeah.
I just mentioned him. What are you blokes on about? I
said, sorry, I won't. I
just said he's not bad at all, mate. Minus 1 point, James Varley.
Yeah, oh dear. And we've got a score running.
Well, we're all on 0 except for Varley, who's on -1.
That's right. Okay, the time has come.
Yeah.
And I will be the final adjudicator. And what you're going to do, boys, you're not going to tell your team. You're not going to think about it out loud. You're going to think about your 4. When you're ready to declare it, declare your bench and your starting front row forwards. And also some explanation as to why would be lovely.
Are we allowed to use players that the others have used?
And is this any era?
Yeah.
Is this
because what I'll do is have a spare 1 or 2 up your sleeve as well to slot in.
Okay.
So I don't know what I can talk about now while you two are thinking. I can maybe do some music. I can tell everybody listening that if you want a free ebook for Christmas with some coaching tips, all you have to do is send me a message on socials at Rugby League Coach with your email address or admin@rugbyleaguecoach.com.au.
I'm ready.
Taylor's ready. Taylor's got his hand up. Whoa, wait. James, are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, I'm just going down my list. I'm ready. Yes, I am, Lee, just about. Okay. Yes.
Right. Now, Taylor, remember who the host is. I'm going to do this with very much a build-up. So we're going to have 8 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have number 15, and we're going to have number 17, because those jerseys tend to be the fattest, don't they? Sometimes 16.
Listen. We're doing a podcast on props. You don't use the F word here, okay? That's the forbidden word in this podcast. All right.
Taylor,
so do you want
Taylor, Llewellyn Brown?
Matt Scott.
Your number 8, please. Wait. Matt Scott.
Mm-hmm.
James Varley. Who's yours?
Glenn Lazarus.
Lee.
No, I'm not doing it. I'm the adjudicator. Okay. I'm going to decide which one wins. Your number 10, please, Taylor.
James Graham.
Yeah.
James?
Adrian Morley.
That's aggressive.
Pommies everywhere.
Yeah.
I do think if you want to get a front rower, go to England. It's a bit like if you want to find a goalkeeper, go to Holland or something. Like if you want to find a football manager, go to Scotland. If you want to find a prop, go to England.
Okay.
Number 15 on your bench, Taylor.
Andrew Fafita.
15 on your bench, James.
Shane Webke.
17 on your bench, Taylor.
Jared Warrior-Hargreaves.
17 on your bench, James.
Junior Paulo.
Oh, you've done that you're appeasing to the adjudicator. Can we get a penalty?
I did say I thought Paulo was the best front rower in the game at the minute. It doesn't mean I think he's better than some of the other names on there. Okay, so
his offloading game coming on, really.
Excuse me. The submissions are over. Okay. Matt Scott, James Graham, Andrew Fafita, Jared Warrior-Hargreaves is Taylor's team. Taylor, talk me through your processes of that lineup.
I had a good think about who I was going to put in my lineup. I had a really good think about who I wanted to start the game. Now, I thought that Matt Scott and James Graham, not only they both have that presence on the field, they go the same speed the whole time. They're very good defensively, which you need at the start of any game. And they're just hard-nosed. They want to know one way, and that's forward. They'd run through brick walls if you had to have them do so. They'd do it gladly for their team. I think that they would work very well together. I think Matt Scott's very no-nonsense. James Graham has the ability to do a little bit of ball work down the other end if you need him to. And I just think both yin and yang, both those players just provide the perfect start. You could comfortably get 30 minutes out of both of those guys. On the bench, I've gone for, you'll notice my starting two have got very little errors, very little penalties. James Graham had the occasional, but very little penalties. But then I've just gone for all fire off the bench. I've gone for leg speed in particular. Andrew Fafita had a great palm and great leg speed, and Jared Warrior-Hargreaves was just known to getting to his front. I think that once you have a few tired forwards around the middle, the way that Andrew Fafita at his best broke open games of football, just ran over the top from 40 metres out and scored tries. He was just outstanding, you know. I think him coming off the bench is great. And Warrior-Hargreaves in short stints, you know, you're really drumming into his head what his job is. I just can't see anyone being able to put the wood over that forward pack in the world. I just think that collectively they're very hard-nosed, they're tough, they're strong, and they have the firebrand on the bench. The only worry would be the firebrand has a few penalties in them. That would be my biggest concern, really. And that's just being honest. Hargreaves and Fafita knew how to rack up penalties.
Talk me through your combination, James.
Well, Glenn Lazarus, rock solid prop forward from bygone past. He just do a solid job, make the yardage, be a strong presence. Adrian Morley, well, I suppose that Taylor might win the penalties game with this, with the starting prop forwards, because Adrian Morley might be a bit of a liability occasionally with that. And I just thought bring Shane Webke on as another solid prop from the bench, and Paulo with his offloading game. Just been able to add that bit more and exploit maybe a slightly tiring defence with the second phase game, perhaps.
Okay, I'm going to give you both points out of 10 for your combination and the way you've explained it and everything. Taylor, I think your thought process is nearly there. I think, though, that I would probably bring James Graham off the bench and start where we're here with Jared, just because of that firepower, that fearsome start. Then when the game has been softened up a bit, James Graham and Fafita coming off the bench with a bit of football in Graham.
Yes.
And with Fafita's footwork. So that's just a little change I'd make there. So for your whole combination of props, for your rotation, I'm going to give you 8 out of 10. Okay?
Okay.
James, for your combination, I'm only going to go about 7 because I don't think you've put as much thought into it. Okay?
No.
So that's the prop rotation. That's not the personnel. Right. It's the theory behind the thing. Yeah. Now, while you've been talking, boys, I've also scored each prop out of 10 because I am the host, so I'm in charge of it. All right? You can get me back, Taylor, when you're hosting a couple, whichever one you host. We're doing the hookers next week, aren't we? Next week, we're talking about hookers.
And my hookers would complement my front row rotation. Actually, you know what? Let's do that. Let's.
We should keep the teams.
Keep the teams. You know what I mean? So I might.
We'll end up with the best ever 13, basically, won't we?
17.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, no. Well, we'll only have 2 props, so we might have to agree on leaving a half or hooker on the bench and an outside back. Can we agree on that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm making a note of my props.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Matt Scott, massive fan. 9 out of 10. Glenn Lazarus, slightly different era, but I don't think you can ignore his Premiership winning titles too and the stature he had in the game. So 9 out of 10. So you're both on 9 out of 10 so far for your personnel. James Graham, massive James Graham fan, but I only think he was an 8 out of 10 prop. I think the reason he's not that 9 out of 10 prop, 10 out of 10 prop is he didn't carry his team to any grand final victories in Australia. He has in England, to be fair. And I guess I don't think he had quite the aura that some of the others that we mentioned have. So I'm only giving James Graham 8 out of 10. And James has pipped you here because with Moz, I think he's a 9 out of 10. I think because Mozza, nobody was telling Mozza to pass the ball. And especially in the early days, Mozza could score a try. Mozza was a childhood prodigy in that sense. Like, he was really good. So at the minute, James, you're 1 ahead.
Right.
With the starting. So I reckon you're going to get, put it this way, I think Morley's better than Graham. James is going to be thinking of passing or whatever. Morley will just knock his block off at some point.
That fear factor.
James Graham's not soft, but I'm not saying that. I just think. I
agree. And if you look at the even if the rest of the sides, if you compared Webke to Fafita, Webke's,
the better prop.
Absolutely.
So whereas you've gone for the combination, James is beating you in personnel.
Yes.
And I've even, because I'd say Fafita's an 8 out of 10.
Yes.
Webke was a 9 out of 10. Jared Weir-Hargraves. Paulo I'd only put 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
But Jared I'd put a little bit below him.
Right.
So I'd put 7.5. So in terms of scores there, boys, basically, rather than we do the maths, basically James won. Because I do think right, and this is an important coaching thing sometimes. Sometimes you just need to have the right cattle on the field. And that. So based on that, right, if I was picking a prop forward rotation, I'd probably start with Webke in your team, James.
Yeah,
because Morley was that bit more mobile. Can you imagine Webke and Lazo starting, and then Morley and Paulo coming off?
Yeah, a bit better version of that Bradford Bulls team that I talked about, Lee, I think.
What I should have done, Taylor, and I apologise, my bro, what I should have done is given James 6 out of 10 to make his score look a bit respectable on his rotation, because his thoughts on rotation were actually just to put the best ones on. And I guess if you've got an embarrassment of riches like that. And what is interesting, though, as well, like, do you reckon Webke and the like, do you reckon they'd be happy being on a bench, really? Like, you got to think about that.
Yeah, they wouldn't. If you're picking a side purely on the, and one that I thought about putting in there, but I couldn't really put in because I didn't necessarily watch him play. Like Beatson, Artie Beatson.
Yeah,
the conversations around him about as a front rower. If I think about the things I've heard and all that, he would actually be really good to come off the bench, probably in replace of Weir-Hargraves. If I had Fafita and Beatson, or, Beatson maybe starting and then Jack Graham off the bench, you know what I mean? But Beatson sounds like he would have been in the modern game, sort of that perfect impact sort of prop. But I didn't have enough data. I couldn't make that decision, unfortunately. Absolutely. I think, if you were putting the best cattle on the park, there's probably a fair few other names you could rattle around and throw in there. I think players like Ruben Wiki were really hard done by, but not being in my side. And, Jared Rea-Hargreaves is a great representation of New Zealand, and he's been a long-standing great front rower in our game who's really come into his own at the Roosters there after he left Manly. But yeah, look, I certainly looked for rotation and how I would play that side. Thinking about it again, Graham would do good off the bench, but I'd probably make that adjustment after a couple of rounds, Lee. I'd see how they're going, and I would have made that adjustment in due course. It's a long
Hey,
season.
trust me, it's only arbitrary, man. I could have given you 9 out of 10, really, couldn't I? And then we'd be and give James 6 out of 10, and you'd have lost by 0.5 points.
It's a long season. It's a long season, mate. I'm confident I would have made the adjustments.
Boys, I reckon that was an awesome chat. I really enjoyed it.
I could keep going.
Well, I'm yawning. I want to go to bed because England are playing in the morning. So
who have they got?
Wales,
aren't they? Yeah.
If they lose to Wales, they won't get let back in the country, I don't think.
Well, they had a draw. They had a draw with the Americans.
Mm.
Lads, I'm starting to think it's not coming home.
It's not as bad as it sounds, that, because number one, England have never beaten the USA at a World Cup, stretching back into the 50s.
Huh?
It's just a bit of a Did you see how USA celebrated after they won the game? After they drew the game, it was like they'd won the game. And number 3, there's actually quite a few Premier League players in the USA side now. So it wasn't that bad. Wasn't that bad thing at all.
What are your thoughts on the Socceroos?
I reckon you could probably get a team from the Rugby League Coach podcast to give them a good game, really. Like, I think they've got a good coach who's improving them as they go into the tournament. But yeah, there's a lot of... Yeah.
Mate, a win on Thursday morning means we're in the finals. We're in the top 32.
Well, that's great, yeah.
What do you mean?
What I will say on this podcast, right? People criticise for using the term soccer. Soccer actually came about because the full name of football is association football. So if you shorten the word association, what do you get? Take the soccer. A off and the A off, you get sock. So then you just call it soccer.
Yeah.
With that fine nugget of information, I say goodbye to James Varley, who did well for King and Country today. Thank you for joining us. Taylor Brown. Okay. Taylor Brown, you are in thick grass there for those who are watching on YouTube.
Well, this is where front rowers did their best work. Hand and knees, nose in the grass. I thought it was
appropriate.
Very appropriate.
Yeah. Great to see you, boys. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and
thanks,
everyone else who listened and watched, we'll see you all through the summer. Maybe not Christmas week. See ya.